step aside, Kenny Rogers, Merle Haggard, you can go take a walk. Willie Nelson, you can ride on back to Texas. Make room for the great Clyde Shaw. Yes, make room for the great Clyde Shaw. Clyde and I have been friends for many, many years, well over 40 years. And he's been one special friend to me during this time. When you see two people who think a lot of each other and are real close, there's a common bond that holds them together. And music, I guess, is what's kept Clyde and me so close down through the years. I don't get to see him as often now as I used to. His work schedule has changed that. But his father and I worked together in the shipyards, and I got to know his father. And his folks lived right across the court from my folks in Old Broad Creek Village. So Elmer and I, that's Clyde's father's name, Elmer. We got to know each other pretty good, and I'd go up to see my folks at night, and then I'd always end up over to Chalk's. And I felt close to all that family, still do. And Elmer and I would sit around sometime, we'd play some old songs, we'd tell some funny tales about things we knew. And Clyde at that time, I suppose, was about 12 or 13 years old, best I can remember. So Clyde, he'd stand around and grin, and he seemed to enjoy it. And so Clyde kind of took a liking to music, and he said someday he was going to buy himself a guitar and he's going to learn to play it, which he eventually did. But Clyde has a nickname, you know. Some of his friends and his brothers and all call him Tarzan. Well, I was responsible for that moniker. And the way that came about, there's a little story Clyde told me, many years ago. He and a couple of his buddies and their girlfriends were out. They were out riding one night, and they decided they'd like to go in swimming. There's an old sand pit that used to be back behind the airport. I don't know whether it's there now or not, but the Chalk boys had found it, and they always loved water. And so they and their friends would go there and go in swimming. I was over there a few times with them. But on this particular night, they decided they'd go swimming. So they drove up to the sand pit, and Clyde understood the agreement was they all going in skinny dipping, because they didn't have bathing suits. So Clyde never was the one to want to be the rotten egg, you know, the old saying, last one in's a rotten egg. So Clyde, he undressed first. There was a diving board up there that some of the boys had erected, and it was a bright moonlight night, so Clyde, he got up on the diving board, right in the bright moonlight, in his birthday suit. But the way it turned out, he was the only one who went in swimming that night. So I got to kidding him about playing Tarzan. So I gave him that nickname of Tarzan. Then I called him Tarzan in front of some of his other buddies and told him why I had given him this name. So they began to call him Tarzan. Well, I'd be up at Elmer's and we'd be out there sitting outside, and Clyde would come out, and I'd say, "What do you say, Tarzan?" One night Elmer says, "Why do you folks call him Tarzan?" Then I told him the story. So he started calling him Tarzan. And I'd go up there and say, "Well, where's old Tarzan?" He said, "Well, Tarzan, he and some of his friends have gone off somewhere doing something or another."
Dad, you're a nice guy. I love you. And about the money that I borrowed?
He told me he wasn't leaving me in his will, okay?
I'll take her half in the will. Here, he wants the home house. Dad's planning on selling the house, Howard. You better come up with a down payment.
Oh.
He ain't gonna say anything.
I'm staying out of this.
Love you, Dad.
Love you.
Jenny,
She screwed it up.
I know you want to Love you, Dad. Hi.
Now we have to go through a bunch of takes and grab us on the wrong cut and the bad cut.
Hi, Dad.
You're gonna
Are we ever going to get it right?
Okay. Hi, Dad. We love you. This is fun. We're getting into this now.
Home sweet home to me, good old Rocky Top, Tennessee. Corn don't grow at all on Rocky Top, there's too rocky by far. That's why all the folks on Rocky Top get their corn from a jar. Rocky Top, you'll always be home sweet home to me, good old Rocky Top, Tennessee. Rocky Top, Tennessee.
Rocky Top,
Tennessee.
I'll ease her off.
When did I first meet Clyde? The story I'm going to tell is not like the one he's going to tell. How I met him was Earlene and Ann and myself were going to the movies. And he and two other guys, I think was Tanker and Benny, were passing by in the car and asked where we were going, and we told them we were going to the movies. So they said they would take us if Clyde could go with me. So that's the first date I had. We went to the drive-in movie, and from then on I dated him, and after 3 years got married. Still here with him.
I remember the day that Clyde was born. I was born January 6, 1928, and we lived in a little two-room house down in Paquimins County, North Carolina. And my brother Clyde was born in July of 1930. So I'm about 2 years and 5 months older than him. On the day he was born, my Aunt Eunice came to our house to stay with Mother while she was giving birth to Clyde. And she came out of the bedroom, so the reason I remember it so vividly, she came out of the bedroom and she had a great big white sheet, and it was as big as a woman's hat, all like that with a thing tied around it. And I asked her, I said, "Aunt Eunice, what have you got in there?" She said, "It's full of chinches." And we were going down Mother sent us to the store to get some kerosene, just Clyde and I. And on the way down there, we were attacked by a vicious, I thought it was a bulldog, but luckily he couldn't get across the fence to get to us. And so we ran to the store, got the kerosene, and on the way back we started talking about wild animals, and especially wildcats, because back then a lot of wildcats actually, they trapped them and caught them back in that section of the country. And as we were walking along the road on the left-hand side, about a quarter of a mile before we got to the house, we heard this noise went, meow. I looked at Clyde. Clyde looked at me. He said, "It's a wildcat." I said, "You're right," and we took off. When we got to the house, there was a barbed wire fence. There was a fence down bottom with barbed wire across the top, and a gate that opened. I went across, I just took one leap and jumped right across that fence, and the fence must have been about 5 foot high, up to a horse's neck anyway. And Clyde took one jump and went under the gate. I went over the fence, and I ran beside Mary. There's 2 mules we had, Mary and Kate. I ran around the back of it, and Clyde ran right into the mule, and it scared the mule so bad. There was 3 of them. I forgot the other one's name. That they jumped the run, and they jumped the fence and took off down the road. We were screaming and hollering so loud. And Mother came out in the yard and met us and told us it was just Dad. It wasn't really a wildcat. And it took 3 days before they finally got those poor mules back in from that epidemic. He's very honest. He's honest with himself. Very trustworthy. He would be a good man to have for a friend. He would fight at the drop of a hat. If you ever got in a scrap with him, in fact, he used to box all the way through school when we were just kids. And Clyde and I played together actually more than Lloyd and I did, because I don't know why, for some reason, Lloyd was always going off with my dad, and Clyde was, we called him Dad's pet, because he seemed to show favoritism toward Clyde. I guess that's why, well, I don't know why he did that.
I am glad.
We were going over to my mother's house.